to start, and we can have another form of waiting for the others to come. And anybody has some sort of idea about the picture? In 2013, the Chinese president Xi um, paid his first state visit to Costa Rica with his wife during his first presidency. So that made it very clear the country of China was willing to establish some sort of very good relationship with Costa Rica. And also today we are here, it's supposed for us to draw an even closer relationship between us. So you can see we have a very strong basis for our friendship between us. And since this is the last training courses for us, it's the last one, and tomorrow will be the closing ceremony. So I want to, well, also I would ask to give a very specific topic on bacterial fluid approach in watermelons, and also the method for the control of the disease. So there can be some sort of very specific topic will make us a little bit boring, because as we all know, at this time of the day, just minutes after the lunch, in our body we have a lot of things to do. Firstly, our stomach is now very busy with digesting our food. And also our brain, in our brains, we need to digest some of the things we've already got in the morning. So just try our best to keep our eyes open. And if you fail to do that, there's no problem. I won't wake you up. Okay? So, outlines for this topic. First part, we give you a very brief introduction about the background of the history of watermelon bacterial fruit blotch. And secondly, to discuss a little bit about the bacterial features of BFB causal pathogens, which is a bacteria. And thirdly, the symptoms of BFB. And last, the method and also the control strategies of BFB. Okay? So the first part, to give you some idea about the history of watermelon bacteria fruit blotch, which in short we can say that BFB, easy to understand. And watermelon is a very important vegetable, or also called a fruit by some people, originated from some tropical African countries, and which is now widely produced in many tropical and also some subtropical regions in the world. From this map, you can see all the dotted countries are watermelon producers. And the dots from China is bigger than all the others, which means China is the bigger watermelon producer in the world. And as we've already known from this morning's presentation, China is now the leading watermelon producer in the world. That's the map, and the harvesting area every year is around 2 million hectares, which is about 50% of the world total. And average yield, this morning we've already known, is around 40 tons per hectare, which is about 1.3 times over the world average. Annual production around 80 million tons, which is about 70% of the world total. So that's the data from the year 2016 and the FAO data, which gives you the similar idea about over 40% of the cultivation area and 1.3 times the average yield, and also around 70% of the yield, the world total production. And here are some things in China by farmers doing their watermelon production in open field, and they went open field, and this one open field, the farmer is looking at his crop, and also the people there harvesting watermelons, and also there's another new way of producing watermelons. They hang them up, the fruits up, and in their case, the fruits won't get in touch with the soil, so that will make the fruits or the melons clean of any soil contamination. And the fruits can then be sold to the market at a relatively higher price. And for farmers in the field, they are looking forward to the yield and to the productivity. And for all the crops, not just watermelon, and the productivity or the average yield is determined by many different factors. Firstly, the weather conditions, because as you can remember, in that map covering all the watermelon production countries, there's no watermelon produced in the very cold region in Russia, because the temperature there is not suitable for watermelon to grow. So the firstly is determined by the weather conditions. And secondly, it's about the varieties, which we've already covered something this morning. A better variety will give a higher yield. And thirdly, the good cultivation. There's no guarantee for two farmers to plant the same variety in their fields and to get the same yield potential, because different people or farmers will do different things in their field and will have different outcomes. And also we need to worry about the pest management, because some of the pests, such as insects and diseases, will damage the crop. And in that way, people need to fight against these pests, including insects and diseases, and to save or to share with them the fruits. Is that right? And if we've already got the background, educational background of crop science or agricultural science, we should know for crop diseases, we can divide it into 3 different types, depending on the causal pathogens. If a disease is caused by a fungus, that disease is caused a fungal disease. And such as in watermelon, the Alternaria leaf spot, which is a fungal disease, and anthracnose, which is another fungal disease which causes the lesions on the surface of the fluid. And also the dumping up caused by many different pathogens such as Pisium, Fusarium, and Rhizoctonia, and those kind of species which cause the damping up, which means the the plant cannot stand and will fallen apart and to cause the cutting of the leaves of the stems. And if a disease is caused by some sort of bacteria, that disease is called a bacterial disease. And in watermelon, some very important bacterial diseases are like angular leaf spot, caused by the Pseudomonas species of bacteria, and also bacteria fluid blotch, which we will discuss later this afternoon. And also, if a disease is caused by some sort of virus, that disease is caused viral diseases. And mostly the viral diseases are mosaic diseases, which means there will be spot or kind of discolored spot on top of the leaves, and also the plant will be shorter and smaller. So that sort of diseases are mainly caused by virus. So I'm not quite sure whether you know the difference between these three different types of diseases. Which one is the easiest to control and which one is the most difficult one to control? In my opinion, the fungal diseases are the most easiest disease for us, for farmers to control, because most of the fungal diseases are caused by some sort of spores, such as Candida spores and ascospores. And those spores will be dispersed from one place to another by wind or by rain. And once we see the symptoms on top of the leaves, we can spray the chemicals. There are quite a lot of different fungicides available now to kill the fungus and to kill and to have very good control over the fungal diseases. And the most difficult one for us to control is the virus diseases, just like human diseases. The virus diseases, due to the fact that the virus, once invade into the cell, the plant cell, they will give part of their DNA or RNA into the host chromosome. And in that case, it is very difficult for us to use any kind of fungicide or chemicals to kill the virus. So just like in human beings, the AIDS and also even the flu virus are very, very difficult for us to control. So every year we might have several times of flu for all of us. I think that's quite common disease now, and it's very difficult for us to control. And the best way for us to fight against the virus diseases is to build up a strong body and to increase our nature immunological status, and to make us healthier and stronger, and then to fight against the infection of virus. And bacterial diseases are in the middle, so it's not very difficult and not very easy either, because most of the bacteria are living in the soil. So if you have the background or understanding of agriculture, you will know it is not very easy for us to treat or to kill bacteria in the soil, because it's in a large area there are millions or billions or even far more bacteria living in the soil. It's not a good idea for us to even try to kill the bacteria. So let's move back to the BFB. What is BFB in watermelon? And BFB is one of the most important diseases in watermelon production. And the causal agent of BFB is Acidoborax ebonea with a subspecies of Seychelles. And we can call that in short AAC because that Latin name is very difficult for us to pronounce or to remember. So just remember AAC and the disease is called BFB. Okay? So that pathogen was first identified in 1989 by American scientists as another species, which is the Pseudomonas species, and laterly renamed as AAC. So, come on. Epidemics of BFB watermelon around the world is quite interesting. At present, the BFB spreads in many countries, and from there you can see even with Costa Rica, this country, and all these even from the USA and China as well. So you can see, and also BFB can affect not only watermelon, but it can also affect the other kind of cucurbit species, such as the other kind of melons or muskmelons or cucumbers or even pumpkins. So that makes the disease more severe than we can consider because it can affect quite a lot of different species of watermelon, vegetables. Epidemics of BFB, and you can say, just to give you a map, possibly we can say is existing in nearly all the watermelon production countries in the world. Is that right? Okay. So we can say for sure this is a very big problem for watermelon production, not just for Chinese people or for farmers from Costa Rica. It's an international matter, so we need to worry about. Things that American scientists have a very good habit of keeping documents. So we will take that country as an example to see how rapid BFB can spread among one place into another. From documents, we can say the first or the earliest report of BFB was from the watermelon seedling bed introduced into Georgia in 1965. And the first epidemics in watermelon production field was noticed in 1969 in Florida, and that was recorded in 1988 in Mariana Islands of the Pacific Ocean. And then in 1989, the damage was noticed on watermelon production in Indiana, and leading to 80% of the melons unsuitable to the market. And also since then, an increased damage of BFB on watermelon was noticed, and in 1992, it was severely spread in Georgia, and in 1994, it was widely spread throughout many eastern states in the USA, and confirmed of the disease or the pathogen in at least 11 states. And the infection even caused problems to some companies, and such as in 2001, and BFB was detected on a watermelon variety growing in a Florida transplant house, and the company who sold the seeds to the house, which is Syngenta, was at that time suspected source of the outbreak of the disease, and then the company had to issue a nationwide recall of that So if you are doing your business with watermelons, you will say that a big loss for the company. So from here, it might not be quite clear to draw a map in your mind about how rapid the disease can spread from one place to another. If we just put all that information in that map, we will say more things. First report was from that part of America. And a couple of years later, in 1992, epidemics were found from several eastern states of the country. And then 2 years later, it moved westward into those parts of the country. And then later on, till the year 2000, BFB has already been found in nearly all the watermelon production states in the USA. So from here we can say, once you find some diseased watermelons in your country, it is more likely that several years later, that disease will be found throughout a big region or even the whole country. So, in the other countries, I couldn't find the data from Costa Rica, but I did find some data or information for the other countries, such as in Israel, because we got no people here from Israel, so it's no problem for us to say something about the disease. Is that right? And I won't, just want to make people unhappy. And the first suspicious symptoms were found in 1979. And then during 1992 to 1994, more pathogens were introduced into that country. And it is estimated that possibly the infection of contaminated seeds were imported from, tomato or eggplant seeds, which means those seeds might have already been contaminated by the bacteria. And then the epidemics were noticed in Israel during the year 2002 to 2003. And in Turkey again, the first evidence of PFB was appeared in 1995. And in Greece, 2005, there's a widespread of PFB. And in Hungary, first noticed in 2007. And in Nigeria, the first report from a paper of PFB was published in 2008. And in Italy, the first evidence of PFB damage was appeared in 2009. Let's look at the facts in China. And records of PFB watermelons started from in China during the end of the 1980s. And at that time, it was considered that the pathogen might come from the other countries from the imported seeds. Because at that time, one Chinese scientist or breeder started their breeding work, they imported quite a lot of seeds from the other countries. Possibly within the seeds, some of them had already been contaminated. And then, from the seeds, they introduced the disease into China. And once the disease is there in the country, it won't go anywhere else. It has already been settled down in the whole country, everywhere. And the first epidemic was noticed, and the first symptoms were noticed on the variety growing in Heilongjiang province. Later, I will show you the map and you will find out where Heilongjiang is. And after that, reports on BFB come out from the other different provinces, such as the Xinjiang province, Henan province, and in Mongolia. And during 2001 to 2003, things the authority in China, which means the Ministry of Agriculture, noticed BFB was a very big threat or damage to watermelon production, and they organized a nationwide survey. And part of the survey was taken in Xinjiang and Hainan provinces, and in some specifically selected watermelon and muskmelon seedling plants. And their result showed BFB had already become one of the most important or damaging or devastation disease on melons and can be found in many different places. And the red dotted places are places we already found the BFB contamination or epidemics. Heilongjiang is there, and later from Inner Mongolia and Xinjiang is there, and Hainan is there. So the reason for why we are more keen on looking at things going from those two provinces, I will give you the background of the fact that most or nearly all the Chinese watermelon seed companies that produce their seeds, including the hybrid seeds, watermelon seeds, from the two provinces. During the winter time, they produced the watermelon seeds in Xinjiang, and during the winter time, if they want to speed out their business and they will produce more seeds within a year, they will choose to have the seed production in Hainan province, which makes these two provinces are very important to the spreading of the BFB throughout the whole country, because most of Chinese watermelon seeds coming from those two provinces. And secondly, we can move on to the bacterial features of BFB causal pathogen. And some of the facts, I'm not sure whether we have someone majoring in microbiology. If so, it can be very easy for us to understand about AAC. Firstly, it is called a gram-negative bacteria. All bacteria can be divided into two groups based on the staining of some sort of chemicals, and there will be two different types, which is called negative or positive, to giving you different colors, such as the red color or the blue color. That's that's the basic evidence for us to separate all the bacteria into negative or positive. Secondly, AAC is basically a seed-borne pathogen, which means is spread or contaminated or introduced by the seeds. And bacteria will survive in the seeds and cause the epidemics. And that part has already been confirmed by many studies. And thirdly, and soil-borne, which means the bacteria living in the soil sometimes can cause disease. But this part need to be further confirmed, but we do have papers mentioning this part, especially when the watermelon plants have already been damaged by some sort of, possibly like the insect damage or drought or drought stress, and some of the roots or part of the roots have already been damaged, and the bacteria in the soil can thus invade into the plant through the wounds. And also, the cultivation substrate contamination has already been confirmed, which means the fertilizers, compost, and manure we used into the soil, if they have already been contaminated by the pathogen, it is more likely for us to produce the contaminated watermelon. And the best living or growth conditions for AAC is the temperature at around 25 to 28 degrees with high humidity. 80% to 100% of relative humidity, which means a very high humidity, very wet weather conditions. And AAC can spread by splash or rain or even water. Because during the rain, we must have the experience that the drop of water get to the on top of the leaves. There won't be stains there exact immediately, and the water can jump out and then drop on top of the leaves again. So by that the jump, if the water has already touched the part with the bacteria, it can take some of the bacteria to another, the neighboring leaves. So that's the way it causes a wide area of contamination. And finally, AAC can cause damage to many different parts of watermelon and can infect cotyledons, true leaves, and even young fruits of melons. This is the life cycle or infection cycle of the disease. So if we start here from the contaminated seeds, and the farmers will either to use the seeds to plant in the open air to produce the seedlings, or they can just plant in the transplanting factory or house to produce the plantlets for them to transplant into the field. If some of the seeds have already been contaminated by AAC, the plantlets or seedlings germinated from the seeds will have AAC in their tissues. So that's quite easy to understand, I think. And then later on, the pathogen will move along the veins or leaves or stems to the other part of the or the other part of the plant, eventually to cause lesions on top of the true leaves. And also, there are opportunities for the true leaves to get in touch or contact with the immature fluid. And in that case, the bacteria will move from the true leaves, from out of the lesions, and jump on top of the fruit, and then will cause damage on top of on the surface of the fruit, and then invade into the melon. And once the fruit is mature, the bacteria inside the fruit can cause severe damage, and sometimes it can cause the rot of the fruit. And inside the fruit, all the seeds are unavoidably contaminated by AAC. And if the company collected the seeds from the affected melons, and they will have the contaminated seeds and get ready to sell to the market, and that will cause another circle of the epidemics. So is that clear to you? How can I make everybody here? What? Okay. Right. And very recently, some scientists have found something very interesting. And they found that the bacteria itself can sometimes infect directly the flowers of the melon, the pistil, and from insects. If the insect had already touched the lesion from another plant, and then there will some bacteria carried by the insects, and the insects, once they fly and stop on top of the flower, they will bring the bacteria to the flower. And also that sort of thing can be happened by meditated by rain or splashed. And after that, the bacteria will grow directly down the overall and inside the fruit. And then when the fruit is growing up, from the surface you might not see the symptoms, but inside it quite a lot of seeds can be contaminated by the pathogen because their embryos have already been contaminated by AAC to produce the contaminated seeds. So from that, we will have this kind of idea about the possible routes of PFB infection. Firstly, if we have the contaminated seeds, we must have the contaminated seedlings, and then to produce the contaminated fruits and produce more contaminated watermelon seeds. And secondly, possibly we have already got a very healthy and clean seeds and to germinate and produce the plants in the field, but the pathogen can be brought by water and then to jump on top of the two leaves to cause the damage, infection, and then give you the infected watermelon and also to produce the contaminated seeds. And thirdly, the pathogen can directly drop on top of the flower and get inside the melon with no damage on top of the surface of the melon, but inside it, the fruit, the seeds, some of the seeds have already been contaminated. And also the pathogen itself can be meditated by insects or rains and to drop on top of the fruits, and then it can cause the lesions on the surface of the melon and then to produce some of the contaminated seeds. So you can say this kind of bacterial disease has very different strategies of infection, but in the end it will give us the contaminated seeds. So that's a problem for all our seeds companies to worry about. So with that sort of background introduction, I would like you to think why PFB risks are even higher in the transplanting bed or transplanting bed factories is quite clear, because in the transplanting beds of bacteria factories, we provide very good conditions for the pathogen to survive and for the disease to spread from one plant to another. Because all the seedlings are standing there very close to each other, and the contamination and the connection between the plants, are very strong, and sometimes the leaves from one plant or seedling is overlapped over the other one, over its neighbor. So in that case, if one plant or seedling is contaminated, the bacteria can be easily dropped from one plant into another, and then days later to damage the whole bed. And also it can cause severe damage to the grafted watermelon. The graft is a strategy widely used in China, but I'm not quite sure about whether you use that sort of technique in watermelon production. Which means we use some sort of another crop which is called the rootstock. Normally in China we use the pumpkin, and then we cut the top part of the watermelon, and then to put that part into the rootstock, and then to use the plastic clips to keep the two together. And in that case, watermelon part is called the cell. And in this, what we are looking at from this part of work is to increase some of the resistance, especially to some certain diseases. Because for pumpkins, that crop has increased resistance to some certain diseases and even to some insects. So in that case, we can improve the resistance of our watermelons. But in that process, we will have doubled risk of BFB infection. Firstly, if the cell part has already been contaminated, the whole grafted watermelon seedlings cannot be avoided from the infection. And also, if the rootstock has already been contaminated, the whole seedlings will be contaminated as well. So in this case, if we are doing the grafting work, we need to make sure that both crops or seeds from two different species are clean and healthy. Otherwise, you will have doubled or increased risks of BFB. So, since we've already known the background of BFB and IAC, I just want you to know, please do not think the population of BFB causal agent IAC is simple. It's very complicated, and we will got a lot of work done on this part. We use the modern molecular marker work, and from all their work, it is quite clear all the ASC pathogens collected from different fields, from different countries. From the molecular point of view, all these pathogens or bacteria can be divided into two groups, which is group 1 and group 2. It is quite interesting. Group 1 pathogen can infect not only watermelons, it can also damage muskmelon and pumpkins. And for group 2 pathogens, they can only affect watermelons. Unluckily, all the pathogens collected from China are belonging to group 1, which means our pathogens are very damaged or are very aggressive to the crops. So we need to know the symptoms of PFB. Otherwise, we cannot tell what kind of disease in the field is there. The symptoms identification is very important for all the people. For example, for scientists, based on the symptoms, the scientist will know what kind of disease it is, and then it can work out the relevant control methods or even breeding resistant varieties, such yes. And also for farmers, they need to know about the symptoms, and according to the symptoms, they will know that's caused by ASC, which is the PFB disease, and then they can choose the right chemicals to control the disease. And also for business person, they need to know the symptoms, and then they will know whether or not their seeds have already been contaminated, and then it will give them some sort of increased guarantee for them to sell their seeds. Otherwise, the company will face a big problem. So, in this case, all of us need to know the symptoms of BFB. So, symptoms of BFB on watermelons can be appeared from early seedling stage to the tulip stage and even to the melon stage. For symptoms, and even starting from cotyledons, you can see some sort of lesions that's there, like the soaked symptoms, and laterally you can see patches of lesions on top of the cotyledons. And the first site of the lesions is called the water-soaked lesions, which means the lesion quite similar to some damage caused by hot water, especially on the upper side of the cotyledons, normally along the wing. We can imagine why that's the fact, because the pathogen inside of the leaves, they will move along the transportation system, the veins, going with the water and nutrition. And then the lesions develop into bigger ones, and then turn dark in color, and eventually dry out. Like this, and that part of the leaf or cotyledons is dead. That's the transplanting bed. Once all the seedlings are severely contaminated, you can see we have no healthy seedlings existing there. So we must throw all those things out. And similar symptoms can be seen even on muskmelon cotyledons, because just as I said, the pathogen can affect both the watermelon and muskmelon, and they will cause quite similar symptoms. Underside of the cotyledon and lesions from the upside, and this, the rootstock, you can say, is damaged. Tulips, are anybody who have already had this such kind of experience of notice things in the field like this? And started from very small lesion, discolored part, and then the pest will grow and cause bigger lesions along the vein, and wherever the pathogen rests on top of the leaves, there will be a lesion. You can see it everywhere. Because as I introduced, Costa Rica is a country that has already been affected by BFB in their watermelon production. So I'm not quite sure whether you can recognize these symptoms in the field. There should be something there. And more pictures. Affected tulips with lesions, with dead tissue there, also this part, and the pathogen or moved along the petiole and invaded into the tulips, and the other one, and also the farther side of the leaves have already been contaminated, and some of the leaves will be dry, and this one again, the dead part of the true leaves. But it's very rare for us to say the pathogen to damage the whole plant, which means to cause the death of the whole plant. That's quite quite not a very common thing we can see. You can see more pictures of the lesions. That's the thing we need to keep in our mind. Bacterial pathogen or disease is quite different from the fungal disease. For a fungal disease, once the spore loaded on top of the leaf, the spore will germinate and cause the lesion just on the landing side or on that spot, and then to make the lesion grow bigger and bigger. And in our study, we always to measure the lesion size. But for the bacteria, you can say the bacteria can move inside the leaves along the transportation system, and it can be everywhere inside the leaf and cause the lesion at any part of the leaf. So in that case, it is very difficult for you to measure the lesion size. For example, here you can see lesions everywhere, so it's very difficult for us to measure the real size of the lesion. But for fungal disease, it is quite clear. Normally, there's a round lesion on top of the leaves, and you can measure the size. So that's a big difference between the fungal disease and the bacterial disease. So in the transplanting bed, if seedlings are severely contaminated, nearly all the seedlings are contaminated. And I did some work by the pinpoint inoculation, which means use a needle to give a hole on top of the leaf, just one point there, and then inoculate the bacteria there, and several days later you can see there are lesions everywhere on the leaves, not just that part. And bacteria can move to everywhere in the leaf and cause lesions at any place of the leaf. For muskmelon, again, you can see that there are lesions on top of the leaves from any place, everywhere, with different size. Possibly they contaminated by a single bacteria. And on true leaves, quite similar to the symptoms appeared on watermelon leaves. And sometimes, if you're lucky enough, possibly you can find an infection of ASC on the stems. And in the greenhouse, an infection there, and you can see lesions on the true leaves. And sometimes, if that plant is severely affected, possibly it will kill the plant and to make you have something like this. It's a place which no plants survived. And on fruits, the BFB infection on mature watermelon fruits appears first as very small and dark green stains on the upper surface. Why it must be the upper side of the surface? That because the bacteria come from the upper side from the leaves on top of the fruit. And initially the infection does not extend past the rim, which means the surface, just on top of the skin, the lesions. And from small lesions, and then it will grow and to become bigger and bigger. And also the bacteria can move from the surface into the inner part of the fruit. And then to cause the rot of the fruit. Which means when you cut the fruit, you can see something like that. It's rotten, and that melon is not suitable to the market. And even something like this, and also with the full mixing of the bacteria. And once you see this sort of fruits in your field, you can imagine the feelings from the farmers, because they must have very heavy yield damage. And on muskmelon skin again, quite similar, starting from a very small lesions on top, and then more lesions will appear, and in the end, the whole fruit surface might be covered by lesions. Inside, it can firstly invade into the flesh from one point, and then to cause the damage or rotting part of the fruit around the invading site, and naturally to make the fruit unsuitable to the market and unable for us to eat. And this is a picture from the very, very severe contaminated or infected BFB of muskmelon in the field. No plant can be seen left in the field all the contaminated or infected fruits. But the farmers cannot sell any of the fruits to the market. And you can imagine how big the yield loss or the losses the farmers will in front. So things is very hard time. It's hard to me and hard to you as well. So we will have a rest and then we will continue for the next part and the final half an hour's time for the workshop. Okay? So just have a tea, please.
It was raining, you were right.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was just, during lunch, I got some teardrops.
Ah, it's raining, right?
Huh?
A little bit.
Drizzle. Yeah, just a little drizzle. ¿Y todas las plantas tienen presión? ¿Cuándo es que un presión se convierte en amor? Pero presión es básicamente lo que une la hoja a la rama, por decirlo rápido. Es como una planta de rama, ¿verdad? Tiene un tallito y luego lo presiona. Ese ya es el tallo. Y cuando es vivo, la raíz sigue, eso es una rama rootstock. Oh, es la raíz original. Es la raíz de la rama. Y lo haces inverso de eso. Y este es el rootstock. Ese sería la raíz principal. Claro. No, yo dije rootstock, no la palabra. Pero sí, ese cartón pues es el original. Y ponte uno, el silence, el rap. El rap es silence. No existe la palabra para silence. Silence, nada más. Para, hace mucho estuve haciendo investigación. Oh, qué lindo. No, pero uno se acostumbra al acento. Está sentado y ahí cuando uno ya sabe qué es lo que está diciendo. Bonito, bonito. No, no es de fijar. 下面有微信。
Sí, claro, sí, organizamos mucho, sí, claro, es una,
Ahora no la vi这东西。
sí, sí, porque siempre, bueno,
其实我就有那种。
estoy no aquí así es.
在那个群里面，那我们那个群里面讲解啊，
是吧？到时候我们就因为有些东西，这个怎么说？有些人他这样听完这个以后，突然有个机会的时候，他就找我。而且我知道谁在原来上，好吗？你跟他们聊的东西，我如果是有什么接触的话，他们有什么东西找我，我就马上去。
好，就是我来这两天我来把那个稍微做一下，然后就发
知道的话，你会告诉我了。
好，
然后我对。
Yo diría que primero hay que buscar muchos puestos de estos invernaderos de China. Es muy famosos con montaña. Y entonces ellos hacen giras. Sí, ponen aquí Universidad de Costa Rica. Ahora sí, Universidad de Costa Rica. Perfecto, perfecto. Muchas gracias, Luis. Encantado. Te voy a mandar la información.
Yeah, later I will have a coffee. So do you like try some coffee? Yes. This morning I see you PS the photo in the morning.
Yes.
It didn't work?
Yes, I'm a photographer and videographer of weddings.
Of weddings.
feeling the temperature?
It's okay.
没人在。对呀，这人那个